Welcome back to The Sustainable Creator. If you are new here, I'm Joe.
I'm Lyndon.
And we're business coaches for creative service providers. We get to have a ton of fantastic conversations on a weekly basis with creatives. And lately, the topic of confidence has been popping up, which I think we can all relate to. We all know what it feels like to feel on top of the world with your business or in life versus when you're in a low and you just need a bit of a confidence boost. And today we wanted to take some time to walk through 4 ways that you can build up your confidence no matter what level you are at, which is going to create a ripple effect in how you show up in your business and everywhere else as well. So before we get into it, a little bit of a intro, if you will. I just finished reading the book Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. Highly recommend if you are a bookworm. I really enjoyed it. And a quick synopsis of Adam Grant, if you've never heard of him, he's a organizational psychologist, and his books I really enjoy because he goes through a lot of research-backed psychology. He's done a ton of research himself, but he pairs it with stories. So it's really easy to grasp the concepts and to follow along. And I always learn something new. So in his book, Hidden Potential, he has a chapter where he's talking about the imperfectionists, which is the opposite of perfectionism. And there is a paragraph that I just want to read out loud to you because I think it ties so well into the conversation that we're going to have today. He says, expectations tend to rise with accomplishment. The better you're performing, the more you demand of yourself, and the less you notice incremental gains. Appreciating progress depends on remembering how your past self would see your current achievements. If you knew 5 years ago what you would accomplish now, how proud would you have been? And that in itself, I think, is so easy to forget. I mean, just speaking personally, I have to check myself on this all the freaking time. Just, I'll get really hard on myself with the things that we are working on in business or not seeing as much progress as I want to on any said goal. And I'll have to zoom out for a minute and go, wait a second, look at everything that we have been able to do in the past year or in the past 2 years. We were on a walk the other night and I made the comment to Lyndon about how we've made a lot of long-term plays in the past couple of years that don't always come with short-term gains. It takes a minute to see them, but there's like a long-term effect that is much more beneficial. And that's a bit of a side tangent, but for anyone else who needed to hear that, I think it's really helpful. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what we're going to go into today. The other thing I just want to quickly tell you as a form of reassurance is we have been lucky enough to be in different rooms and connect with people at all types of levels over the past couple of years. And I can tell you that people at every single level, some of the most successful people that you may be comparing yourself to or aspiring to be at the same level as they are, they still have these thoughts where they're like, why am I here? Why would anyone buy from me? What did I do to get this far? Is it all going to be taken away tomorrow? Like, that is still something that they wrestle with, even at some of the most successful points in their life. And so I say that to reassure you because I think that one of the benefits you can do is really kind of lean into and accept those thoughts, which we'll get to in a moment. But just know that it's not just you.
So I think it's interesting thinking about like the context or like the structure of like when we think about how do we give good advice on confidence, and we kind of broke it into 4 main categories that we're going to go through. And I think it's partly broken of like half of confidence is internal and half of it is external in how you show up in the world. And so the first main category that I like to think about is external, or the mannerisms of how people experience you. And what's really confusing with this is I clearly remember when I was first going to high school, my brother, he's like 5 years older than me. He basically gave me the advice, fake it till you make it, because eventually you will actually make it. But on day one, you have so many unknowns and it's so like difficult to be confident in a new thing. And oftentimes we do this in business as well. Like, we launch something new, or we try something that's outside of our comfort zone, or we get invited into a new room and we feel like the first day of high school again. Mm-hmm. Like there's so many unknowns, but part of doing this really well is believing that you are ready for that and having that confidence. And so the external part sometimes comes before the internal part, which feels really confusing. And so you start with fake it till you make it. And some of that in business could look like sell an offer before you've actually fully finished making it.
Which goes into a pre-sale strategy. So just to give you guys the strategy part of this, I know it can feel a little like weird to say, I'm going to sell this offer before it's finished. This is not like what was the name of that festival a few years ago?
Fire Festival.
Yeah, this is not Fire Festival. Like that's not what we're talking about. But there's a very clear workable strategy that you can pull on if, say, you are creating a group program or a course that you can do as a drip format. So I'm just going to give the course example. Let's say that you have a course that you know is going to be really valuable to people. You don't have all of the videos recorded yet. However, you have the first week done. That means you could do a pre-sale option and turn it into a drip format, which means that people who purchase that product would get 1 week at a time, which allows you to then record the next week a week before while receiving feedback from people who are inside it. So it's even more applicable. So there are ways to be able to do this that work in your favor, but we're not talking about Fire Festival where you're selling something that will never be created.
The second version of this fake it till you make it, I like to think of this as identity, or effectively like, what do you put on your business card? There's actually no like authority or credentialing body for business cards. If you didn't know that, like you can put whatever you want on that card. And oftentimes when you start putting your identity out into the world, start with the future identity that you want people to know you for. And then build the proof that you actually are that thing. And it feels backwards because most people are like, I have to collect all the proof and then I can finally accept the identity. But it's actually a lot faster if you accept the identity and then the proof falls in line behind that.
Yeah. This applies to your content too. We did this with every single pivot we've ever done. For example, when we pivoted from photography into business coaching full time, we were still doing coaching when we were doing photo, but we like simplified, went all in. We stopped sharing any photo related content. And we had a couple of photo shoots still on the books that we needed to write out while we were going all in on business coaching full time, but we were not showing that because that's not what we were offering anymore. And that is one of the biggest things that we recommend every creative, no matter what type of pivot you are in. If you're phasing out an offer, if you're switching areas of expertise, no matter what it is, part of that identity piece is making sure that your content matches. Because if you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, that's really confusing to people. You want to only show what you want to be known for. And if you don't know the answer to that question, start with that. Just ask yourself, what do I want to be known for? And then work backwards from there.
So the thing that is in common with both of these things, if you are a millennial, you are at the tail end of growing up with checks. The idea of like putting identity or selling an offer is the same as writing a check. You are making a promise that you will deliver in the future on this thing. And just like you can write a check and give it to someone today, even if there's no money in the bank account, there is an understanding that by the time they go to cash that check, there will be money there, just like you as an expert will be able to deliver on the identity or the thing you sold by the time they get there. And so this is just putting a future point on your knowledge, experience, credential curve that you are asking people to accept a future point of you today and just pulling it forward. So what does some of that look like? Communication is a really big part of how people think about your confidence. And a really difficult one for me, actually, for a long time was I diminished my own credibility before anyone else could. And a lot of that was the words that I used, literally just in conversation. I would say things like, I think, or hopefully, or potentially, or possibly, or all of these like little micro disclaimers that I don't want to be seen as an expert. It was, I think I'm smart, but I also don't want to be held responsible for that, because being an expert, being someone with confidence, there is some like expectation that you can deliver on that. And when I wasn't confident, I gave a ton of micro disclaimers. And so little things that show up is whether you're on a sales call or whether you're sending an email or whether you are actually delivering something, just like reread back what you are writing and remove all of the filler words that make you sound less confident.
Yeah, just being one.
Just as a huge one. I still struggle with this
Yeah.
now. Like I will write out a full email, then I'll go through and remove adjust from every paragraph.
I'll give you guys another example on this too. The other day I was responding to someone and I put haha to try and lighten the mood. And immediately I was like, no, that's not how I want to show up. That immediately, what is the
Diminishes.
word? It diminishes, the confidence that I have in this conversation. And so sometimes it's little things like that too, where it's removing haha from something that is not actually a laughing matter.
The second part of this is removing things also makes you sound a lot more confident. And some of this, like what I have in the notes here is just stop talking, which feels ironic that like you want to be seen as someone that's credible or you have confidence. And oftentimes the people with the most confidence know how to say less words.
Yeah.
There's removing the filler, but there's also removing the explanation. And if I think about this in a sales context, oftentimes people that are really confident in what they're delivering, they will say a price and then they stop talking because they know it's worth that. But if you are not confident in that, oftentimes you'll have 2 or 3 paragraphs of explanation why the price is that. And for certain people, they can just see that you're trying to justify it and it will show that your confidence is lower.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in the pause. I think there's a scene from The Office, which neither of us have really watched The Office. Sorry, Office fans. But there is a scene with Stanley where he says, sales is not that hard. I don't know why people think it's hard. All you have to do is stop. And then he doesn't talk for like 30 seconds. And you get the point of like, oh yeah, that was really uncomfortable. I want to start talking to fill the silence. And that's exactly what happens. So I would find little ways to be able to build up your confidence with that. Maybe start with your partner or your friends when you're having these day-to-day conversations, instead of trying to talk to fill the space. When there's a so-called awkward silence, just let yourself get comfortable with it and sit in that. That will stretch your confidence and transfer over into sales conversations.
The other place we see this, just stop talking, play out a little bit more is as an expert. You are the domain expert in your field. When you are working with a client, they hired you to be the expert. But oftentimes you'll end up getting pushback from a client of you gave them a piece of strategy, you told them a best practice, you made a change for a very strategic reason, and they'll push back of, I don't really like that. Can we just go back to the other thing or do this other thing that my friend of a friend whose dad said this what we should do? And then oftentimes there's this moment of sometimes people will walk back their strategy because they want to save a relationship rather than have your really good strategy be implemented. And that is a disservice to both your future confidence. We're going to get into show the proof later. So the proof will be lower because you now didn't apply the strategy you know is best. But also the second part is you're doing them a disservice because they are getting less of what they paid you for. And to some extent, you pay an expert to tell you where you're wrong and push back on you. And some of just stop talking is this is the strategy and here is the reason for it.
One of our members actually just brought this up the other day. She said that she gave one of her clients some feedback, pushed back a little bit, and they texted her after and said, hey, can you do that more? That was actually really helpful and I appreciated it. And so that's just one example of how your clients, if they are the right ones, will value that.
So this is a little bit outside of confidence, but because pushback is a thing that we talk about a lot, oftentimes the first place to start when you are thinking about pushing back is defer the authority away from yourself. So it's a lot easier to say someone else said this or this is an industry norm than it is to say, I think you're wrong, just because it's less personal or ego based and it's more statistical and fact based. And so as you are building your expertise, start just an archive or a library of really cool stats, figures, reports, experts that you can now start sourcing from when you are giving people advice of this industry report said this, or I read this is the stat of by doing it this way, it will perform better. Because now it's not you telling them, it's you are the conduit of some other knowledge that is credible that they've probably heard of. And that whether they want to accept it or not, is this trusted resource rather than you as an expert.
Yeah, that's one that helps a lot of our coaching clients. This is all like way more common than you guys realize. I think it's really easy to think that we're the only ones encountering something, but we can tell you firsthand because, again, we talk to a lot of creatives. This is pretty common across the board. And so I hope that you're taking notes because we're giving these options because we have seen them work for so many other creatives. And that one is a really good one.
So from here, I want to toggle internal.
Yeah, let's
so
do it.
category 2 is, so the first category was external or mannerisms or how people experience you. Category 2 is belief or how you experience yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot about the concept of self-trust, which is another one that's easy to forget when we get so in the zone with business, life, all of our responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. And there is a lot to be said about building trust in yourself that ties into your confidence in what you can deliver for other people, particularly clients in this conversation. So for example, let's say that you have been wanting to work out more. So you say that you're going to do a workout today. But then you get to the time that you are going to do a workout and you're so busy with something else, you come up with an excuse and skip it. That is deteriorating your trust in yourself. And when you keep promises to yourself, it helps you trust yourself more, which then trickles into trusting yourself more in business. And so I would start paying attention to, is there anywhere in your life that you are breaking promises to yourself that might be deteriorating your own self-trust? And start there, because it's oftentimes in these little ways that we think are just no big deal. We'll get back to it another time. It's just a season of life. Okay, maybe. But what is like small ways that you can start keeping promises to yourself so that you build that confidence back up? Because it does make such a big difference.
This is also like one of the big trends we're seeing in health right now is people are like setting one really big physical goal for the year. Like whether this is, I mean, last year I climbed a mountain. It feels very nondescript. Everyone's climbed a mountain. I climbed a big mountain.
Phil, you were really burying Lyndon climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. He doesn't like telling people, but I will tell people. So carry on.
So the idea of that is like you set a big goal, you follow through because that requires training, that requires like build up, you do a hard thing, and now you have the confidence like, oh, I can do hard things. The flip side of this is you do this so that you can prove it to yourself. You've already done hard things in business. Like even if you're just doing one little thing new, like if you look backwards, you already have those receipts that you've done hard things. Because oftentimes, like imposter syndrome, which is in the confidence spectrum, is because, oh, I'm doing something new. I don't have credibility here. I don't have confidence in this. I don't believe that I myself can do this. But a lot of things by the time you get into business is transferable skills. And there's a lot less that's new than you think. So even though like I climbed a mountain, that also gives me confidence like, oh, maybe I can do a really big bike ride that I might be convincing people to do next year. We're not going to talk about that right now. But some of that is just like, oh, I did a really hard thing in this like area, which means I can now do it in this area.
Yeah.
And if you can start paying attention to in business, what are the big things that you have done that you've stuck with, you've created routines around, you've done it consistently, you've delivered a big project, even if it is different, you now know how to work with clients. You now know how to actually pace out a project, to actually sell something, to actually, and all of those are confidence building and trust in yourself of like, I'm doing a little part new, but the rest of it is actually things I've all done before.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the other component to this is what we're calling borrowed belief, because there's a lot to be said about building that confidence in yourself, you know, keeping the promises you make to yourself. Yes, love that. There's also a lot to be said about borrowing belief from other people who believe in you before you have yet believed in yourself at the level that you want to. And I did this so much during our big pivot from being known as photographers to being known as business coaches. I had people on speed dial, not literally, but on speed dial, that I could message, send a voice memo if I was at a point where I needed encouragement, if there was specific support I was looking for, if I wanted them to pray for me. And having them in my corner made such a difference because they believed in me when my belief in myself started to get a little shaky. And having that borrowed belief is really, really helpful. We have another member inside of Creative Maven Society who, like, this is the exact term that she used. Earlier this year, we were talking with her and she said, one of the things that has been so valuable being in this space is the borrowed belief I have gotten from other members, because she too was in a transitional period in business and would come to calls with questions and specific asks of what she needed. And everyone inside would really just like have her back and remind her of what she brought to the table and give her some tangible steps that she could take to up level her own confidence. And that makes such a big difference. And for you, that might be podcasts, it might be books, but having people in some way, shape, or form that you can have that believe in you and remind you of the belief that you can have in yourself of what you bring to the table. There's a reason that the quote of like, you know, pay attention to the 5 people that you spend your time with the most. Like, there's a reason that quote exists because it does affect the way that we show up. And so pay attention to who you're surrounding yourself with, but also what you're consuming. Like, that applies here too. And if there are certain accounts or people that you are following online that do not make you feel better about yourself, that might be worth paying attention to. I'll just leave it at that. Do you have anything to add on borrowed belief?
I don't think so. We've now talked about externally how you can show up with confidence, internally how you build, like how you have confidence. But that doesn't really answer the question of how do you build confidence. And so the next one that we're going to kind of talk about is the idea of like building a scaffolding and building ways that you can then support yourself as you are building that confidence.
All right, this is when we go back to my pal Adam Grant from his book Hidden Potential. He talks about the importance of scaffolding in order to overcome obstacles. And I found this really interesting because you think about scaffolding with buildings, like you see that in New York or Chicago, all over cities where it's kind of, you know, holding up a building that is being worked on. Am I correct in understanding that? Feel free to be my armchair expert.
I usually think of scaffolding as the stuff that holds the people working on the building.
Oh yeah, that's better.
Not holding
that's better.
the building.
That's better, actually. Okay, so that's scaffolding. And the way that Adam Grant describes it is he says scaffolding is a temporary support structure that enables us to scale heights we couldn't reach on our own. It helps us build the resilience to overcome obstacles that threaten to overwhelm us and limit our growth. Now, this could look like a number of things. We've talked about the importance of having the right people in your life. People definitely play a part. That could be coaches, it could be teammates, it could be friendships, et cetera, et cetera. It could also mean social activities. That's a big one for me right now. I'm looking at what are the hobbies or the outlets that I need on a personal level that pour back into me, that make me feel fulfilled outside of work. That is a form of scaffolding for me right now. It could also be your habits. That's a really big one as well. Of like, what are the habits that you need in order to stay consistent, that make you operate at your best, that pour back into you, that, you know, like whatever it is that you need in this season, finding the habits that really set you up for that is also a form of scaffolding. Also, a fun fact here, which I thought this was so fascinating and it makes me want to get back into this game. He mentioned that there was a research study that found when people watch scary movies, it can be easy to have like nightmares or bad dreams at night, but they found that if they had the research participants play Tetris for 10 minutes after watching the movie, it was enough for their brain to be able to disassociate. Maybe that feels like the wrong word, but basically remove a lot of those memories from the movie and calm down so that they would sleep better at night. And I thought that was really fascinating. He used that in the scaffolding context as sometimes, like, who knew that Tetris would literally be a form of scaffolding as well. So I kind of want to start playing Tetris again because I'm curious if that would help with stress levels.
I think versions of, like, if I think about like what's the game version of scaffolding that can help you build confidence in your business, I think one of the trends that I'm seeing right now that I find really interesting is networks that are activity based. And so for a long time, like we run a network. Like Creative Maven Society is a version of a network with a coaching emphasis where we're building scaffolding for people. But there's a version of this of like in your local city, there's probably networking meetups. There's probably things like that. And some of it is like the casual connection of maybe you go on a hike with other business owners. Maybe you play pickleball with other business owners. And in that safe space, you both talk about what you are learning and you are playing Tetris to reinforce the things that you are learning about your confidence in your own business and your skill level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who would have thought? Okay. So the last category that we have is proof. I'll let you take this one.
This is where most people think confidence comes from, which is true because it's the most irrefutable, but it's also oftentimes the last one to occur. And that's part of the reason that we put this last in this, because oftentimes, if I go back to where I started at the beginning, day one of high school, as a freshman, do I have any proof? No, because this is a new environment. This is a new... But at the same time, like I'm bringing all of the other things, my mannerisms, my belief, the scaffolding of my friend groups that already exist, all of those things. But I can do things to see proof of my expertise, credibility, experience, skills. All of those. I can strategically do things to get proof of success as quick as possible. Because oftentimes people are like, oh, I have to graduate high school to prove that I was good at high school. And that is a 4-year loop that puts a ton of anxiety somewhere in the middle. Whereas if you close the loop and is like, I am going to ace this quiz at the end of week 1, and that shows that I'm good at high school, your loop is now like 5 days. Mm-hmm. And there you can now have a little bit of proof that shows that you're good at this. And now you start stacking them rather than waiting for some big payoff at the end for your confidence. And so when I think about this in business, oftentimes we have big offers that are long and it feels difficult to sell those that is like a big done for you offer. And it's like, oh, I don't actually know how to say that I know how to do this before I sell it, but I have to sell it before I can show that I can do it. And you're now stuck in this proof loop that you just can't close. And so what's the small version of this proof? For photographers, oftentimes this is portfolio days. For designers, this could be small projects or even white labeling under someone else before you're selling your own big projects. This could be like copywriting for smaller emails rather than a full website first. And this is little ways that you can start proving to yourself that you have the credibility here, but also you can now have very tightly constrained loop and you can stack a lot of this proof very quickly so that in a much shorter time frame, you can have a much higher buildup of your confidence rather than waiting for a big payoff in the future.
Yeah. A lot of this comes back to collecting evidence for yourself, which is something we talk about a lot because it just supports everything Lyndon just talked about. But Lyndon talks a lot about creating a win wall or a folder in your phone of things that remind you of what you have achieved, skills you've developed, the positive feedback you've gotten from clients that really, hit home how much you do bring to the table. And so that could be a way of collecting evidence for yourself. There's also, having personal stories from your past success. That goes back to the original paragraph I shared from Hidden Potential at the beginning of this conversation. It's a looking back to see how far you've come. What have you overcome that got you here? What were the moves that you made that got you to the point in time that you are today? Were there specific actions? Were there specific people? Were there things that you had in place that allowed you to see what you do bring to the table? And having a way to be able to look back at that can be so powerful.
This is something that I'm now starting to think about a lot more in our own customer experience of how we build in milestones in our projects. But I think another way of reframing what a milestone is you can also look at this as proof points. So if you have a big, longer term project, is there a way that you can build in proof points where you collect evidence along the way rather than waiting until the end of your project to get one testimonial that is an afterthought? Mm-hmm. And this may feel like it's very self-serving, but it's actually a very win-win situation for you and your clients, because building in proof points is the idea that, yes, I get feedback for my credibility that shows that I'm doing this, but they also then get a point to like stop and look at the progress and be like, oh, we're actually making progress here. My investment is getting returns and the ROI makes sense because we're seeing proof points along the way, rather than I committed to this 8-week project and I don't know what's happening because it's a black box. And so those are very simple ways that you can start building in checkpoints that loop the feedback back to you, that you can see the progress. And that really depends on what your project is, but almost every business I've seen can build those in.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Anything else on that category?
I think the last one is, like, a lot of people talk about the idea of low-hanging fruit, or when you do a project, can you give someone a win almost immediately right at the beginning by taking the low-hanging fruit or the easy thing. Like if you think about in like an apple orchard, like you don't have to get a ladder, you don't have to climb the tree, you don't have to do anything special. It's low-hanging, you can just reach up and grab it, and then you have the apple, if we're thinking about apple trees. And so in your project, is there a way that you can just set up one really quick win right at the beginning that right out of the gate, your client sees a quick win, they love it, they know that their investment was a great investment, but then you get that feedback of like, oh, I delivered already. I have the proof on day 1 or 2, and this is an immediate win for me that you can then stack to sell the next one right after that.
Yep. So if you're a photographer, that could look like sneak peeks. If you are a copywriter, that might look like sending over some phrases that you heard from them in your initial onboarding call.
Or a brand messaging guide.
Yeah. And so these little things that get them excited to see what else you're going to do together. Okay, so those are the 4 categories. As we wrap up here, I just wanted to leave you guys with a great analogy you've probably heard of, but it's a great reminder that I think does tie into the confidence conversation. I believe this was introduced by Elizabeth Gilbert, but maybe fact check that, but I'm pretty sure she's the one that I learned this from. She's an author. She talks about the idea of personifying the fear. You know, a lot of times we'll let fear stop us from doing whatever it is because it can be really loud, and that's a real thing. But she talks about personifying fear and pretending like you're in a car, you're going on a road trip, but you have a conversation with fear and you say, hey, you're going to sit in the passenger seat or in the back seat, but you don't get to backseat drive. I'm the one who's driving. You don't get to pick the music. That's what I'm doing. You just get to be here. And I'm going to let you be here, but you don't really get to steer the ship. I know I'm talking about cars and I just brought up ship, but just let's roll with it. And I think that applies to confidence a lot. As you've heard today, confidence is an action. It is a skill. It is not something that we are born with. It is something that comes through a lot of reps, through having the right people in your corner, through building that evidence for yourself, and so many other little things that it's easy to want one big overnight success story to hit whatever that goal is, like as fast as possible. But oftentimes it takes time and it takes determination and it takes the willingness to try again and again. And that applies to confidence too. So I wanted to end with that because I think that's a really helpful way to be able to just kind of separate from the emotions a little bit so that you are showing up more routinely, which is going to go back to helping you build that evidence for yourself and building up your own self-trust. So I really hope this was a helpful conversation for you guys. I know we enjoyed talking about it. If you guys had any takeaways, please let us know on Instagram. I shared this the other day. One of you guys shared one of the reels, which if you guys don't know, Lyndon does such a good job of putting out like teaser reels from every episode over on our podcast accounts. So that's a really helpful way to be able to see some of the visuals. And he'll put up a bunch a week. Anyway, one of you guys shared one of those reels the other day. And I shared when we reposted that podcasting can feel a little weird sometimes because it can feel one-sided. We love these conversations, but we don't always know if you guys are listening unless you tell us or if you tag us on stories. So when you do, that is why it means so much to us, because we get to hear what the points are that you really resonated with. So all that to say, if you had a takeaway from today's episode, please tell us. We would love to hear that. It means a lot to just know that you're listening. So thank you so much. All right, you guys are awesome. We'll see you next time. Bye.